we are discussing feeling misunderstood by the world and even sometimes the people closest to you. And today we're beginning with one of the deepest wounds that INFJs and INFPs carry. You know, that ache of feeling misunderstood.
I'll carry you home. I'll carry you home.
Welcome to the INFx Council. This is a place where deeply feeling, fiercely intuitive INFJs and INFPs come together to explore what it means to live, lead, and heal in a world that often misunderstands us. The Council is here to discover what is holding you back in life and why, and what to do about it. This isn't about fixing you. It's about honoring your inner truth as the foundation of your life, your love, your leadership, the things that you dream of for your life. And we don't speak from theory, we speak from personal experience. The quiet kind that kind of rises from life experience and from our four people within. I, of course, am Maria Sumilov, an INFJ and the founder of the Sumilov Academy of Human Integration. I'm a veteran advocate of INFJs and INFPs and the author of books and courses and several self-empowerment curricula. And I am here to discuss the unspoken questions behind the INF, the introverted intuitive feeler, pain points.
And I'm Clyde, an INFP, voice of Rooted and Rising. I'm here to help INFx types build healthy habits that honor who they truly are, because the path to power isn't hustle, it's about integrity, consistency, and habits that don't betray your soul.
I'm Farita, an INFJ. I listen to the echoes of the inner world. I carry the story you've whispered to us, the confusion, the clarity, the ache for more. Together, we give the voice to what you felt for years but didn't have words for until now.
So this is not really a debate, it's not a performance, although we do have notes. It's the INFx Council, a shared space for healing and advocacy and transformation, one conversation at a time. So welcome, dear ones, to this episode 1. We are discussing feeling misunderstood by the world and even sometimes the people closest to you. And today we're beginning with one of the deepest wounds that INFJs and INFPs carry. You know, that ache of feeling misunderstood. You know, not just the outside world, although that is most of the experiences of the INFs, but also sometimes the people who are in our close circle, the people who love us the most. And, you know, when we talk about feeling misunderstood, it's not really about getting constant validation, although validation can be good and it can be healing. It's about being seen without having to explain ourselves every step of the way. I don't know about you tuning in or you on the panel, how tiring it can get when you feel like you can't speak freely and you just have to explain yourself or try to almost justify where you're coming from. So a lot of our sense of that ache inside of feeling misunderstood is actually not coming from just feeling isolated or lonely. It often just comes from us feeling exhausted, trying to show people that we're good people and that we have good intent and that we are doing things for other people out of the goodness of our hearts, although it doesn't always land that way. And of course, we all have blind spots for what we do and patterns, and especially if we've experienced trauma. So this feeling misunderstood is often about this massive emotional and chronic emotional labor of translating our inner world into language that others can digest. and that toll that takes on our nervous system and our relationships and on our self-trust as well. As introverted intuitive feelers, we live in kind of often in between worlds, and if you know me, you've seen me live in different worlds even at the same time, and we can live in those unseen layers of life because we pick up really subtle cues, we feel into emotional undercurrents, and often know what's needed before anyone's even saying anything. And yet then we're the ones who have to try, and it feels like justification. It feels like we're asked to justify our own experience because it feels potentially so different to anybody else's. And I wanted to start with this council, with this episode, because I want to start from the reclaiming process so that we are reclaiming our experience as a valid one. We want to name the ways that misunderstanding erodes boundaries, and it damps down our joy in life, and even sometimes can start breaking down our identity as who we are as people, as individual people outside of the places where we belong. But more than that, this is about starting new kinds of conversations. And some of you have seen my Real Conversations for INFJs and INFPs podcasts over the years. You might still find some of them online. This is a continuation of a council of those conversations. One's conversations that really honor the introverted intuitive feeler experience in a real, everyday, nuanced way, and in a way that's really worthy of respect and even reverence. So this advocacy work is not just for our community at the Summit Academy, but every sensitive and insightful soul out there who's been told that they're too much or too complicated, or then on the flip side, feels like they're never quite enough. So let's unpack this a little bit, not just to vent, because I will be asking our council to share their experiences as well, but to heal, maybe to offer a little bit of a new way forward. So Farita and Clyde, when you think of feeling misunderstood from your own experience, what has that been like for you? Maybe where have you seen this show up in your life or in the lives of introverted intuitive feeler students that you've worked with in the past?
So the first would be the identify the emotions of feeling misunderstood. How do I feel right now? And what do I need right now? And see what happens if you, or look at what happens if you don't recognize or admit to feeling this way. Ignoring the problem is neglect. That is causing stress, overwhelmness, self-sabotaging behavior, and depression. And everybody should ask really, how does life change for better when you do get clarity of feeling misunderstood?
And did you have like your own experience or with a student that really showed this to you?
Absolutely. One of the things that is we don't necessarily recognize what we want. We might feel that the life, we need to change the life and we're not happy. And we might even believe what we need to do, but actually quite often we aren't clear for ourselves what is that we want to achieve or what the life could be if we would understand ourselves and others. So it all starts from the self-awareness, to understand what do I need, what do I want, and how can I better communicate, listening, and exchanging thoughts, and to do it in the way that it's clear, less offensive, and more constructive.
Clyde, what are your experiences?
Yeah, the feeling misunderstood is very familiar. And it's a matter of what language I've put on it over time, and like how integrated I feel with who I want to be in the world, what habits I want to have. If there's a consistency to how I'm showing up, and like when I disappoint myself or whatever that looks like, it's difficult to not feel misunderstood and take it on as part of my identity that I'm misunderstood, and that I need to continue carrying that judgment.
So it's really interesting to observe you both, because Farita, you're an INFJ, and Clyde, you're an INFP, and you're speaking from, I could really feel the feeler in both of you. Like with Farita, the extroverted feeler is all about making sure that you're communicating yourself clearly so that people can understand. And then Clyde's talking about the, how you can take on the identity with the introverted feeling. That it becomes so personal. It becomes you almost take it into your being, your body, and just how the feeling of being misunderstood can be so. It's such a different experience for different introverted, intuitive feelers, even though we still are highly intuitive, highly feeling, and certainly very introspective. So that's a really interesting observation. Sorry, I always go kind of meta because it's because of the years of especially with the INFx Unveiled work and the 4 people within work. I'm always really curious about the 4 people that are showing up within. I had some questions arose as I was listening to you both. You okay? I asked you some questions because this is an interesting one. So Farita, you mentioned that to really knowing yourself, which can be hard for INFJs because we're used to kind of knowing the outside world and then trying to almost like fit ourselves into it. So with that piece, there's a lot of, because we care so much, INFJs care so much about the external relationships and end up carrying a lot of that weight, doing a lot of the emotional labor. What would you like to say to an INFJ who is just absolutely exhausted by carrying all that weight? What would you say to them if you were their best friend? What would you want them to hear from their best friend?
I love that question, and so relevant in being understood. And first of all, I really emphasize how useful the 4 people within is, the knowing the all the parts and utilizing our personality, cognitive functions, so that it's not pending only on one, like a feeling. If it's overtaking all our communication, it will become, often we feel disappointed because we didn't, and especially being introverted, we not necessarily share everything so clearly. Being intuitive is the other thing. We might be able to read quickly what other people are meaning without words, and thinking that other people are using that intuitive insight same way, which is not happening, and often that causes misunderstanding. So using all 4 people within, like intuition and sensing and logical thinking and feeling, and then combining, integrating all that information and all what learning to utilize those personality traits in the communication, I think will help enormously. And then the other thing is reparenting, because we can't control how other people are talking, what triggers them, how they understand. We only can take responsibility how we ourselves understand our needs and what we want to express, and learn to be good at knowing what is the aim, what we want to, what is the target and aim for what I want to say, what is the message, to be clear first to ourselves, and then it's much more easier to communicate, because a lot of misunderstanding, it just not listening and communicating and not understanding that other people use cognitive functions differently. So that one of the things that I've learned a lot from Sumirov Academy is how my personality type and how other personality types, how they communicate. And it's just amazing. I thought just because I'm so good at intuitively learning, I actually miss quite a lot beforehand. Then I learned to know other personality types and how they communicate, how they listen, what type of communication they're more acceptive, and what kind of communication they likely to reject more often, or kind of distant themselves. That's been really eye-opening.
Interesting. And then from that, just what you said, I felt like we try to intuit. I spoke to Clyde about this the other day. I had a student, horsemanship student, who's a highly intuitive lady. She's so intuitive that she was trying to use her intuition, because we have those two information collecting parts of us, the intuition and the sensing, so the 5 senses and the pattern recognition. And she was trying to intuitively figure out what the pattern was in communicating with the horse, but she wasn't listening to what I was saying to her. So, what you said reminded me that by the time we've kind of come to an intuitive conclusion about something, there's so much that has happened before that we may have missed completely, and then that leads into misunderstanding. And I don't know about you guys, but I find that 90+% of relationship problems actually are because of misunderstandings or miscommunication. So we didn't say exactly what we meant, or we didn't ask for what we needed, or we didn't listen to the other person and took it personally instead of seriously, or we project on the other people in other ways. So that's great, Farita. I really appreciate those reflections. That's awesome. Clyde, do you have anything on that? Because I do have a question for you as well. Do you have any reflections on Farita's answer there?
I think on Farita's reflection, I would just say that, this like finding out how my functions work for me, and like really having keywords, like with my extroverted intuition, I really enjoy the idea of brainstorming, and it really gets me outside of myself and gets me creative and, really energized. Whereas like if I could get stuck in that story of the historian, that brings my energy down. And so just knowing which part of myself I need at any given point, and know who's doing what job in my internal community.
Right. And maybe one of these podcasts will put up the round tables for both, or maybe even we might even start doing that going forward, so that people can see a visual representation of what we're also talking about. That's awesome. That's excellent. So Clyde, I have a question for you then from that. internalizing piece, because you're the habits guy, like you're all about the healthy habits of bringing, helping yourself to have a psychologically good day and continuing to build your life forward. This is at least how I'm interpreting and how I'm seeing it. What would you say to INFPs listening who have done exactly what you talked about before, which was you internalize it and take the I am a misunderstood person, the kind of the cloak or the mantle of that role? What would you do from habits perspective to well, I mean, is that healthy, first of all? Like to what degree is that helpful to be holding on to that? And then secondly, if you would want to change it, how would you start changing it?
I think of a phrase I say a lot, that if you don't like your story, just write a better one. And it's, I can spend hours feeling bad about myself and talking bad about myself, and that'll only encourage that a habit in the future. Whereas if I slowly lift the muscle of, oh, what is it like if Clyde's not weird, but Clyde is just unique or special, or what word can I try on that I judge less? And it doesn't have to be any less or more true. It just has to be curious and open to options and flexibility.
Nice, because that's we do get to choose our own stories. I believe that. For those of you who are listening, and your back might just be arcing up from what I just said, which is we choose our own stories. I want to be really clear. If you don't know me, go and do some research or listen to other podcasts, whatever. But in short, I experienced severe childhood abuse. I come from that space, and I'm sure Clyde and Farita, you've had your own struggles, which you're welcome to share to the extent that you feel appropriate throughout our work together. It's not my story to tell, but I agree with you on that, Clyde. Like, there's so much that we experience. Like, I could forever be that 5-year-old child in that potato cellar, hiding from those men who were trying to come and I could be so I actually probably need to bleep that out, because we don't want to put too much potential triggering information into these spaces without putting a warning. So I'll need to put a trigger warning on that. And that's not the only, and that's not by far the most horrible thing that ever happened to me. I don't talk about things I'm not ready to talk about, which I hope that is, everybody feels comfortable to take that on, to say I own my story. But then the other side of that is that once you are familiar with your inner children, you have your inner parent that comes home and parents the inner children to make them feel safe and secure and seen, and you have your adult self there in the world doing the important work that you were born to do. Those are the spaces where we then start to realize that yes, we do have we have several different stories we could write. But when we're in the space of feeling like we are these things, we don't necessarily see, and it can feel really disempowering to hear somebody else say, you can write your own story. But, having done this work, we know this to be true, and we're not saying this to try and minimize anybody's experience or trauma or anything like that. So from the habits perspective, then if you start to challenge it, if you start to challenge your story, your, persona, the role that you're playing in this life, and want to start finding a more authentic story that is true to your heart, not as at the receiving end of the world, not the trauma story. What are the first steps that you advise your students to take on, Clyde, with that challenge?
Oh, I really like the habit of writing a question. And the question, it's kind of along the lines of affirmations of how do I recognize my values every day in the form of a question that I ask myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, just opening yourself up to that curiosity and that habit of reflecting on what's important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So almost assuming importance by creating a question, importance of yourself, your individual self, by asking a question that already assumes that.
Yeah.
So you're saying this value of mine, authenticity, for example, how can I cultivate that authenticity more in my life today? So you're already you're asking yourself question, you're trying to get the pioneer, the outward intuition engaged in looking for different ways that you can live out your authenticity, but you're assuming the authenticity, which means you're owning your journey right now.
Yeah, and it's really about like there's gonna be one time in the day when I'm authentic. I just need to look for that evidence and make a habit of becoming aware of it. And
Nice.
as we bring awareness to it, it starts to change on its own and becomes an easier habit to replicate.
Yeah, nice. Farita, do you have any observations on Clyde's share?
I think it's a wonderful thing to kind of combine the question and the affirmation, because already our thoughts are leaning on that. It's like taking a lead of the day, and making easier to focus on what we want to change in that day in our life, and continue from there.
All right. Shall we leave it at that for today, because time is ticking? Everybody okay with that? Yeah.
Sounds
Anything
good.
else you want to say before we start wrapping up? Okay, awesome. If you found yourself quietly nodding away today, just tuning into Clyde and Farita's share, or maybe something resonated that I said to you, it is likely because of the experience of feeling misunderstood or as if you don't belong, just as you are. It sounds familiar to you. You might know it really intimately and all too well. For many INFJs and INFPs, this type of sense of being profoundly misunderstood, it really can shape the way that we learn to show up in the world, at work and in our relationships and in our friendships, and even with material things like money and possessions. We become fluent in trying to read others while then rarely sharing ourselves in a way that is open to being read by other people. But when we start to soften our voices a little bit, our internal voice first, because you have to do this for yourself first, you deserve it, then we start to not edit our truth, and we'll be able to begin to explain who we are, how we see the world, and that's when we begin to be really and feel really seen. So if we continue to protect ourselves, not that protecting yourself isn't important, especially if you've experienced trauma, but if you're overprotective of who you are and don't share it with people close to you, of course, in very gentle bits first, it gets really exhausting to carry all that weight. And we can come to a point where we start to give up on life and relationships and everything. And I know so many INFJs and INFPs who are hermits. They're living hermiting lives because they can't face another rejection or what they perceive to be a rejection. But feeling misunderstood, it doesn't have to be a sentence of solidarity or confinement in life, nor is it really in and of itself a weakness that you're having to overcome. It's more a signal it's more a message, like a sacred message, that your system is asking for an alignment for you in your own life. And when we dismiss and override that signal, we end up living lonely lives that might look right in the surface. You know, we love these memes online that say, oh, would you live here for a year for $100,000? This is an island where there's only one house. Of course, everybody would say yes. But the challenge is that when we only see relief in situations of solidarity, that's that signal that we're talking about. You know, we don't want to dismiss it or override it, but making light of it as well can feel like we're connecting with other people who make light of it, but we still have that signal running through us. It's a sign. And we end up living lonely lives that look surface-wise look fine, but deeply feels disconnected underneath. And this is some of the work that Farita and Clyde and I have been doing for quite a while now. And through this work, we don't teach you to adapt more efficiently to a world that doesn't yet know you or is able to hold your depth. We show people how to lead themselves, lead you into your inner world first and then out of it authentically. Not by becoming louder or harder or becoming somebody that you're not, because you're not those things, but to become clearer, more self-trusting, more emotionally sovereign. Because when you know your inner truth, when you know your four people within, you stop outsourcing your worth to other people's understanding. And of course, this work isn't just personal, although it is that. It's also necessary for the world. And this is not to put pressure on you, but I want to give you a bigger picture of where you actually do belong. Because now more than ever, if you look at the global climate of interpersonal experience, now more than ever, the introverted read introspective, intuitive read pattern recognition, and feeler read compassionate voices are needed in leadership, in our systems, in companies, in communities, in politics. And that begins with all of us feeling emotionally safe enough to show up in our own life as we are. So you are an important part of this bigger picture that we call life. So if this episode stirred something in you, stay with it. Let that ache within you mean something significant. Read that signal. Let that signal lead you back to yourself. And know that you're not alone in this. Not anymore. So thanks for joining us at this episode, this first episode of the INFx Council. The conversations that we have here are just the beginning. And if you're ready to move from an inner ache into some aligned action, maybe from surviving to more sovereign way of living, I'll invite you to join us at the Suvilov Academy at suvilov.com. Our mentors and our courses and our community is designed for INFJs and INFPs who are ready to rise with clarity and confidence and compassion and live their own lives as exactly as they are. Farita.
Well, I really thank everybody who joined us in this meeting, and share with somebody who you feel that needs to hear that they are not alone, and that the changes are possible. There's knowledge, and there's habits, and there's tools that we can learn to know ourselves better and be understood better, and also understand other people.
And that's the thing, because when healing happens faster, it does echo through the world. Clyde.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. And remember, you don't have to hustle to be powerful. You just need habits that honor your heart. We'll be here when you're ready, planting seeds of change and questions that grow. So send in good vibes.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Until next time, stay rooted, keep rising, and remember, the world doesn't need you to be
I know
perfect.
what it
It needs you
means.
to be fully
I'll
you.
carry you
Thanks for joining us.
home.